Hey guys, Miss S here. I hope you're doing well, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today to walk you through this guided note packet in person. But I think it is important that you guys at least get through it, and then we will talk about this more on Monday and any questions you might have, okay? So, you should have gotten a handout, the Quotation Station integration packet. And this slideshow is just going to walk through that for you guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started and go to our first slide. Okay, awesome. So, this first quote is on your guided note packet. And it's by Miss Maya Angelou. You might have heard of her. She's a famous African American poet, civil rights activist, writer. You'll study her more once you get to your junior year. We'll actually read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which is an incredible book. So I have this quote by her, and it reads, "Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning." All right, and I just thought this was a really beautiful quote. This really explains why we have words, right? They're not just letters on a page. They mean more because they're infused with something deeper. They're infused with experiences. They're infused with different types of meaning. Okay, and that's what we're going to really focus on with these quotes that we pick through our documents on our LBQ. Okay, we're going to try to pick quotes that are infused with meaning, and that meaning is supporting one of our points from our thesis, right? So I just thought this was a really great quote, and to expose you guys to Maya Angelou, I think that's super important. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what I like to think about quotes. Okay, I like to think about quotes as song lyrics, all right? So we all have our favorite songs. We have our favorite artists, right? We have our favorite albums. And a lot of times, the reason why we like these lyrics are because they're meaningful to us. Okay. So I want you to take a moment and think of your favorite song lyric. All right. Just rack your brain for maybe one lyric that you really love, and that you really hold dear. Okay. And these are the things that probably come to mind, right? Who is it about? Okay. So you might know who it's about for the artist singing it if you're like a true fan, or maybe it's about something specific to your own life. When you hear it, it brings up something personal, right? What does it mean? Okay, if it is personal, why is it personal? What does it mean to the artist that's singing it? What does it mean to you, right? This can go both ways. And how does it make you feel when you listen to it? Okay, these are all really important things, and this is why this lyric is important to you, because it makes you feel a certain way when you hear it. Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys my favorite song lyric, and why it's so important to me, and how I would kind of break this lyric down. Okay, so you're probably not surprised that my favorite artist, of course, is Taylor Swift. So my favorite lyric is going to come from Miss Swift. All right. And my favorite lyric is from the 1989 era, her song Blank Space, that you guys might be familiar with. Okay, so we could sing it together if we were in class, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it out loud to you. Okay, so it's going to be forever, or it's going to go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over if the high was worth the pain. Okay, so for me, what Taylor is saying in this quote is, this love, this relationship, whether it be a friendship, romantic, whatever, it might go down in flames, right? It might end badly. Who knows? And you can tell me when this is all over. You can tell me whenever we've gone our separate ways if it was worth all of it, right? If this love that we shared, if this friendship that we had, if it was worth it in the end. Was it worth going through everything we went through? And I think that this is a really positive lyric, because in my mind, I think of it, she's saying, yes, okay? Yes, this is worth it in the end, right? And we know about Taylor's reputation, all of these different things. And she's saying, look, guys, I don't care, right? I don't care if y'all think these relationships are going down in flames. I'm going to do me, and I'm going to get through this, because to me, it's worth it. It's worth it. Everything I go through with these people in my lives. Okay? So I take it personally, right? I feel that way in everything I do. You know, even if it ends out wrong in the end, like I'm going to do my best and I'm going to enjoy it while I can. So again, that's why I love that lyric. And there's so many ways you can interpret this, okay? And there's so many different analyzations you could take to even a song lyric. So I hope this really proves to you guys that any lyric can be analyzed just as any quote can be analyzed. And with Maya Angelou, going back to that first quote, right? Lyrics are infused with meaning, and so are quotes. They're all words on a page, okay? And it's how we bring them to life that counts. Okay, so going to our next slide, guys. So let's relate everything we've just talked about back to the crucible, okay? So we know old Giles, right? Poor Giles, like he was one of my faves, and we all know what happened to him, right? More weight, okay? That famous line. He died for his family. He, refused to speak. He was pressed to death by stones, okay? So let's read this quote from the Crucible. Old Giles must be spoken for, if only because his fate was to be so remarkable and so different from that of all the others. He was in his early 80s at this time, and was the most comical hero in the history. No man has ever been blamed for so much. All right, we talked about this quote when we came across it, so you guys might remember, okay? So this is Arthur Miller. He's giving us a little bit of information about the characters before we even meet them, okay? So your first blank on your page, it's right under this quote by Giles. It reads, an author can describe important events in a story by telling you about them, okay? So this type of storytelling is called expository. All right, that first blank that you have on that first page of your guided notes should be expository. And we've talked about expository and what that means in class. So some of these things are going to be pretty obvious. We're just, again, giving them definitions and being able to name them, okay? So let's go to our next slide. Sometimes what a character says and how he or she says it is just as important as what happens. It can give us clues about what character's identity, or it can hint at what has happened in the past or what will happen in the future. Okay, so this is no surprise, guys. When characters talk to each other in the story, it is called dialogue. All right, so you want to be sure you have that for your second blank. Okay? A single line is usually called a quotation, all right? We can integrate these quotations into our writing to reinforce our argument and to cite evidence from the text. All right, so if y'all are like, why do we need quotes in our writing? Why are they important? All right, we know they're important for these two reasons. The two reasons being they reinforce and they help us cite evidence, okay? They make us more credible as a writer, all right, if we can back up what we're saying with evidence, okay? So basically what I've done for you guys is I've come up with 3 ways that I found in my own writing. Throughout college, there were 3 solid ways that I used always, always, always to integrate a quote. Okay, so we're going to go through those 3 methods when it comes to integrating quotes. And what I'm going to have you guys do this weekend when you're writing your body paragraphs is to use these different methods of integration, okay? So we're actually learning about them today, and then I expect you guys to apply them to your writing this weekend. All right, so the first method we're going to learn about is using a colon, okay? We're going to talk more about this. The second method is using an introductory or explanatory phrase, okay? That's the second method you could use. And the third method is using part of a quotation in your own sentence, okay? So the reason why I've labeled these 1, 2, 3 is, of course, there's 3 different methods, but also the difficulty goes up the higher you go, okay? So using a colon is pretty simple. You guys probably already know how to do that. Using an introductory explanatory phrase is a little more difficult. And then using part of a quotation in your own sentence is the highest level of integration. All right. So that's the goal here. I want you guys to try to use level 3s throughout your writing. But we're going to talk about how to get there. Okay. So let's start with the first reason. Okay. Using a colon. All right. So if you turn the page to the second page of your guided notes. All right. So let's talk about colons, okay? Colons have a few uses, such as introducing lists, separating the hour from the minute, and following salutations in business letters. There are more, but today we're going to focus on using colons to introduce quotations. Okay, so there's like one main rule that you have to remember when you introduce when you use a quote. I'm sorry, when you use a colon to integrate a quote. Okay, so there's one big thing. All right. So you want to be sure that you use a colon after an independent clause to introduce a quotation. Okay, so that first blank there is independent clause. All right, an independent clause is a sentence that could stand on its own. All right, so you guys know what a complete sentence is. Okay, you guys should know these grammar rules. All right. So you have to be sure that what is stated in that independent clause must have a link to the quotation and should be your own assertion. All right, I'm going to explain what those big words mean and all of this in a couple of examples, okay? But you should just know that anytime you use a colon, you need to be sure that before the colon, there's an independent clause, all right? So let's look at an example, all right? So for example number 1 on your guided notes, you need to be sure you write this, okay? So this is a quote from The Great Gatsby, which we will be reading at the end of this quarter, okay? So in this example, it says, Fitzgerald gives Nick a muted tribute to the hero. Gatsby turned all right at the end. Okay, so y'all need to be sure that you're writing this down. If you need time, you can pause the presentation, go back to the slide, whatever it is that you need to do. Okay, so be sure that you're writing it out exactly. Okay, the parenthetical citation, all of these things, because you're going to use these guided notes as examples this weekend, all right, to write your body paragraphs. Okay, so if we remember our rule for this, to use a colon, you have to be sure there's an independent clause before the colon, all right? So Fitzgerald gives Nick a muted tribute to the hero, okay? This is a sentence that could stand on its own. If we put a period there, that would be a complete sentence, okay? So yes, this is used correctly, all right? And what I mean by this is your own assertion is you're kind of telling the reader something about the quote, okay? You're giving them a little insight to it before the colon. All right, and this thing at the end, right, the page number, that's called a parenthetical citation. And the reason why it's called a parenthetical citation is because it's in parentheses. Okay, so for your body paragraphs this weekend, you're not going to have page numbers. Okay, these are documents we're dealing with. So what you would put in the parenthetical citation is document A. Okay, so that's what would be in the parentheses behind the quote you're using, or whatever document it is that you're pulling from it. Okay, don't abbreviate it doc A. I want it fully written out. Document whatever the letter is that you're using. Okay, so remember on here, if you notice, the punctuation is outside of the parenthetical citation. Okay, it is not inside the quote. It is not inside the quote and outside the parenthetical citation. The punctuation, the period has been moved from inside the quotation to outside the quotation. Okay, you have seen this many times, I'm sure, but you need to be sure that in your body paragraphs this weekend, you are correctly parenthetically citing. Okay, so let's look at another example to kind of wrap this up. All right. So for example number 2, I'm talking about the author John Green. All right, I think you guys are all familiar with him. He's written The Fault in Our Stars, Looking for Alaska. That's actually becoming a mini series, which I'm super stoked about. Okay, so in this example, it says John Green weaves water symbolism into his novel, even in the smallest of details. Hazel nodded and sank into an aqueous sleep. All right, so let's talk about some things going on here. First, let's talk about the colon rule, okay? This is the correct way to use a colon because everything that came before the colon is an independent clause. If we put a period where the colon is, that would be a complete sentence. John Green weaves water symbolism into his novel, even in the smallest of details, okay? That's a complete sentence, all right? Let's talk about these brackets, okay? Maybe these aren't so important. You might find yourself needing to use that this weekend or in the future, okay? So this quote probably said, she nodded and sank into an aqueous sleep. But they couldn't use this in the quote because the reader wouldn't know who she is because we haven't read the whole book, okay? So anytime you replace a quote with your own words, that goes in brackets, okay? So they're just telling us was a character named Hazel that was nodding and sinking into an aqueous sleep. We wouldn't have known who she was, okay? So that's just how you replace a specific word in a quote with your own words. The only time you should do that is if you need to clarify something to your reader, okay? And again, we have a parenthetical citation, okay? Clearly this comes from page 120 of the novel, and look and see that the period is no longer inside the quotation, it is outside, okay? Because this is in parenthetical citation. All right, so again, you need to be sure you wrote that down for example number 2 on your guided notes, and that you wrote it down exactly, okay? Because you want to have these examples correct. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the second method of integration, which is introductory or explanatory, okay? So bear with me on this. There is a couple of things that we need to remember with this, okay? So the method, here it is. The best introductory phrases will use verbs. Okay, so that blank there is verbs. All right, as in Hemingway writes or Brett insists. An introductory phrase without a verb, like for example, does not always integrate smoothly. The quotation is usually a complete sentence, and then you must remember to retain the capitalization of the first word. Okay, so this is important because these are 2 rules when it comes to introductory or explanatory if you're going to use that method, okay? You need to be sure that before you put your quote in that you have a verb, okay? That's number 1. And then you make sure that once you integrate the quote that it retains the capitalization of the first word, okay? So we're going to explain what that means in some of these examples, all right? So don't stress. Let's look at an example. Okay, so for example number 1, all right, another American writer, okay, Ralph Waldo Emerson reminds us of the fact that everything takes time when he states, every artist was once an amateur. Okay, so notice, guys, we're not dealing with parenthetical citations here. This is just a well-known quote. It's definitely come from some type of document or book, probably, but we're not actually citing this one, okay? In your body paragraphs, you will definitely have citations because they are all coming from specific documents, okay? But let's just talk about this rule here while you're writing this, all right? So remember, the first rule is that there's a verb. There has to be a verb before the quote, all right? So if we look here, the verb that comes directly before the quote is states. Do you guys see that? States, okay? So that's a verb. It's not a very good verb, but it's one nonetheless. All right. We also have other verbs. All right. Reminds. Okay. All of these verbs are in there. All right. But the most important part is that you have at least one right before the quote. Okay. And if you notice that it retains the capitalization. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you are using a verb, if you're using an introductory or an explanatory phrase, okay, you're going to capitalize the first word or you're capitalizing the first word of the quote, okay, because it's starting a new sentence, right? This isn't part of your own sentence. It's a quote, okay? It's the beginning of a sentence. So it retains the same capitalization, all right? You're capitalizing the first word, okay? So those are the 2 rules if you're going to use an introductory or explanatory phrase. All right, let's look at another example. Okay, example number 2. Matt Rochelle of the New York Times reports, big tobacco companies are putting out among the strongest health warnings in the fledgling e-cigarette industry. Okay, so again, we're not focusing on parenthetical citations here. We're just focusing on the 2 rules of an introductory or explanatory phrase. Okay, so let's look here. Is there a verb before the quote? Yes, and that verb is reports. Do you guys see that there? The verb is reports, okay? And then if you notice that the first word of this quote is capitalized, okay? I know it's a proper noun, big tobacco, right? It's like I don't even know how to describe it, right? It's like a type of tobacco company or whatever it might be, but y'all, it's capitalized, okay? You just keep that rule, all right? You retain the same capitalization you would at the beginning of a sentence, all right? So those 2 rules are in this example as well. You've got your verb, and then you've got your beginning quote with a capital letter, all right? So those are the 2 things you need to remember, okay? So you want to be sure that you have these written down. At the bottom of the page, I have some helpful hints for you, okay? So let's go through these hints now. All right, so number 1 here, if you lead into the quotation that ends in a that or as, don't follow it with a comma, okay? The word that or as replaces the comma, all right? So this is basically kind of converting it into a third level integration, converting it into your own sentence. All right. So if you were to say, Matt Rochelle of the New York Times states, right? That's what we just wrote down. Okay, you have states and then a comma, and then you go into your quote. All right, if you were going to say Matt Rochelle of the New York Times states that, you don't need a comma after that. Okay, that replaces the comma. And then the first letter of the quotation should be lowercase, okay, because you're continuing your sentence. Does that make sense, guys? You're continuing a sentence that you are writing, okay? So the capitalization is lowercase because it's in the middle of a sentence. All right, these are things that you probably know, but I'm just kind of giving it definitions for y'all. All right, so you want to be sure you filled in those blanks for number 1 under hints. All right. Number 2, okay, if it is your first time citing from a particular source, it is wise to tack some credentials to the author's name. Okay, so here's some examples, all right? John Green, New York Times bestseller, all right? So you want to be able to tell your audience, hey, I'm quoting someone credible here. Like, give them some street cred, right? They might not know who this John Green is. Like, why does it matter that we have a quote from him? Okay, it's the same thing with your documents, all right? We might not know who McCarthy is, all right? So you need to say, Joseph McCarthy, right? Like a big political figure of the Red Scare, or however you want to say it, okay? And it's enclosed in commas here, okay? It's called an appositive when it's closed in commas, all right? So John Green, comma, New York Times bestseller, comma. Okay, here's another one. Dr. Robert K. Jackler, a professor at the Stanford School of Medicine. There should be a comma at the end of that. Who knows who Dr. K. Jackler is, right? I don't know who that is, okay? But if I know he's a professor at Stanford, I'm probably going to listen to him, okay? So you need to be sure you're giving credentials. That's a great way to do it, okay, right? Arthur Miller, a famous American playwright, okay? And you would enclose that in, why can't I ever remember? You close that in commas, okay, guys? So that's just another helpful hint. Okay, lastly, I have another little thing of hints. If you guys see that big box that says other words for says, okay, I know y'all can use like thesaurus.com or just Google things, but I want y'all to write this down, okay? I don't want to see words like, you know, Matt Rochelle of the New York Times says, okay? Pick a better word here. Pick a better verb, okay? So these are some verbs that you could use. Acknowledges, argues, clarifies, compares, evaluate, explains, explores, implies, illustrate, points out, shows, states, suggests, reasons, reports, writes, okay? I want y'all to write down all of these different words, okay? Because if you write them, you're more likely to remember them, all right? So you want to be sure that you have all of these different alternatives instead of using the word says, okay? All right, moving on here. Once you have that, again, if I'm moving too quickly, just pause the PowerPoint, X out, pause it, screenshot it. I don't know, whatever you need to do. Just walk through this on your own time. Okay, guys? All right, number 3. Okay, this is the highest level of integration, using part of a quotation in your own sentence. All right, so you need to be sure you've turned the page on your guided notes. This is number 3. Okay, so here's the method. All right, instead of quoting a whole line or passage, write your own sentence. Blending is that blank. Okay, blending in the quoted words or few words necessary. When you integrate quotations in this fashion, you do not use any special punctuation. Instead, you should punctuate the sentence just as you would if the words were your own. Okay? So you want to be sure you have those blanks. All right? And let me explain what this means. The best way to explain is through an example. All right, so we have our friend Edgar Allan Poe here. Okay, so this is the way I would integrate a fact about Edgar Allan Poe into one of my own sentences. Born in 1809 to a pair of traveling actors, Poe's life was filled with more than his share of grief, tragedy, and heartache. Okay, and this came from a piece where the last name was Blair, and it was on page 2. Okay, so that's my parenthetical citation. All right, so do you guys see how in this one I have integrated it into my own sentence, right? I've continued my own sentence with the quote. Born in 1809 to a pair of traveling actors, Poe's life, right? I'm continuing it, okay? So you need to be sure that it's blended, all right? And y'all see how the capitalization is my own capitalization, okay? I don't capitalize A because it's a continuance of my sentence, all right? You just keep the same capitalization, okay, guys? So even though this is the highest level, I feel like you guys are probably accomplishing this, okay? So you need to be sure that you understand how to do this, all right? So really take time to write down this example exactly and kind of think about how you would integrate something into your own sentence, all right? And again, we have my parenthetical citation, the author's last name, the page number, and it comes at the end of my sentence, okay? It's not coming right after the quote, okay? It's at the end of my sentence that I've integrated it with, all right? So for you guys, it would say document A, okay? Remember, we don't need to worry about the authors of these documents. We're just citing documents, all right? And the most important thing I'm looking for is to be sure you know that the punctuation goes outside of the parentheses, all right? So remember those things. Be sure you have that example. Okay, so our next sheet is a little exercise that I want you guys to do. Okay, if we were in class together, I would let you do it in a think, pair, share. But since everyone's going at their own pace, just go ahead and do this alone. Okay, independent. All right, so what you're going to do is I want y'all to think back to that first integration technique, okay, using a colon, okay? So you're going to determine whether each sentence properly uses a colon. All right, you write a C for correct if it's correct, and an I for incorrect if it's not correct, okay? So remember the two rules you're going to think about when you're doing this, okay? Actually, it's just one rule for these, right? The one rule is what? You have to be sure that it's an independent clause before the colon, okay? If you can replace that colon with a period and it's a complete sentence, then that's correct, okay? So I want you guys to go through each one of these and determine, are there independent clauses that come before the quote, okay? If there are, it's correct, okay? If there aren't, then it's probably incorrect, all right? So take some time to go through that and label those C or I, all right? We'll be going over this in class on Monday, but you need to be sure that you've gone through. Take the time now, pause the PowerPoint, whatever you need to do to go through this, okay? All right. Okay, guys, so for this next one, it says solo dolo. You've been doing this whole packet solo, so just continue to do so. Okay, so for this one, you are going to introduce each of the quotes below with an introductory or explanatory phrase. So yes, you need to be sure you remember the two rules for this, okay? So you're using a verb, okay? You're using a good verb, all right? That was a weird way to say that, but you're using a verb other than says, okay? And you're also, remember those helpful hints of you need to be sure you have credentials for each of these people that I chose the quotes for. Okay, so for number one, it says, "Things do not change, we change" by Henry David Thoreau. So if you don't know who Henry David Thoreau is, Google it. Okay, figure out who he is. And you want to be sure that you give him some credentials, put them in that appositive, right? Be sure there's a verb before and introduce that quote, okay? So be sure that you're looking back at the examples that you wrote for the second integration technique, introductory explanatory phrase, that you're going through these and you're practicing, okay? You put the verb in, right? The capital letter remains capital, okay? It's the start of a new sentence. It's the start of a full quote, okay? I have a quote by Ashton Kutcher for number 2, and then for number 3, it's Steve Jobs, okay? So I think you guys know who those guys are, but if not, Google them, okay, to give them some credentials to make your introductory to that quote even better. All right? Lastly, okay, this is supposed to do your homework, okay, but y'all probably have time in class to do this, okay? So for this, y'all are going to be doing the highest level of integration, and I want you to do it with a song lyric, okay? So you're going to try to integrate a song lyric into your own sentence. So what I want y'all to do is pick a lyric, right? Google it, whatever you need to do, okay? Make sure it's school appropriate. I don't want any foul language. I don't want anything, that I don't want to see on here, okay? Y'all know what that means, all right? So write down your lyric, okay? Then put the name of the song and then put the artist, okay? Now you need to figure out a way to blend that lyric into your own sentence, all right? Look at the Edgar Allan Poe example. Try this, guys, okay? Don't just say, "This is hard, I can't do it." On Monday, I will be checking to be sure this entire packet is complete. And then what I will do is I will go through, review the correct answers for these exercises, answer any questions you guys might have, and show you my own examples. Okay, so just try to do this. All right, try to do this. Okay, so you're going to apply method 3 to your favorite song lyric. You've seen my favorite song lyric, now do yours. Okay, be sure to use your notes, they're here to help you. All right, so do not turn this in, guys. Again, I'm going to check it with a stamp on Monday. You're going to need this. Okay, your homework is to do those body paragraphs. All right, so you need to be sure that you're using these quotation integration strategies, right? These 3 methods. Pick one. Pick more than one, okay? And use them to integrate your 6 quotes that you need in your body paragraphs. All right, guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Again, I'm sorry I missed you today, but I look forward to seeing you on Monday. All right, great job today, guys.